Hello everyone, Andy here, and today I want to talk about Warmachine. Specifically, I want to talk about why I think Warmachine is the superior mass battles war game to be playing these days. Hold on, mass battle, we'll get to that later. Consider this video a primer to Warmachine in 2024. I will explain the appeal, the models, where to start, what to buy, a bit of the lore, the confusion of swapping from Mark III to Mark IV, game sizes, model counts, what sort of community it is, casual or competitive, really just a big overview of Warmachine Mark IV. First, if you don't know me or have forgotten, I got super bummed out by 10th edition 40k and stopped playing because it was a genuinely horrible gaming experience. And as my social life hadn't been built around playing 40k and I was willing to straight up sell all of my armies, I didn't have too high of a sunken cost fallacy in the way of me getting out of that. Then, with 40k being unalive to me, I started seeking my fortunes elsewhere. I've always liked the aesthetic of Warmachine, and it released a new edition a year prior with new models, so I picked some up and started playing. See, I don't like metal models, and with Warmachine finally making the switch to anything other than metal, I was seeing green flags. I am colourblind though, so they could have been red. I don't know. Your mileage may vary on that one. At the same time, I began playing more board games and card games and focused on skirmish wargaming, seeking a quicker experience to my gaming requirements. In this video, I want to try and convey why I think Warmachine is very genuinely the superior mass battle wargame. Now, of course, all these things from aesthetics to mechanics are subjective, but I will do my best to explain my reasoning so that you can make your own decision. I will, of course, however, be hugely biased because that's going to be way more fun to listen to for you. So, high-level concept pitch. What is Warmachine? Warmachine is a war game consisting of between 20 and 50 models that takes 2 hours to play and has a gameplay focus on combo and buffing gameplay to create a puzzle-solving element that I genuinely haven't seen in other war games I've played. The app has great functionality and also lots of background fiction if you get tired of endless list building. It all takes place in the steampunk universe of the Iron Kingdoms, where we have the mighty and honourable Signar facing off against a world of religious fanatics, murderous elves, Russians, resurrected Vikings, robot ninja dragons, and the undead. Honestly, basically, it's just kind of like dragons, pirates, and undead everywhere. It's just dragons, pirates, and undead 24/7. And Signar? War crimes. But I mean, you get it, right? It's your standard, cool, colourful artwork world where when you dig into it, everyone's a little bit evil, My personal favourite, however, are, in fact, the Signar trenchers and gun mages. I love them. A little bit of a soft spot going for the troll bloods, so much so that they're why I painted my 40k orcs blue, because there are no orcs in Warmachine. And I think Cricks are really just great, absolute peak, undead, evil faction vibes. The imagery that most connected to with Warmachine is of course the machines themselves, the warjacks and the war beasts. These are steam powered or raw muscle powered, in the case of the war beasts, units that define the world and are the first note that things aren't just gritty World War I. No, they are gritty World War I with fantasy elements. And we have to mention the warcasters. Who are they? What are they? Well, it's in the name. They do war and they cast the depression debuff on their feet turn, mainly. These are the heroes of the world, the most powerful spellcasters that shape entire battles around them, both on the table and in the fiction. They're the named characters of the setting. Oh, wait, hold on. Okay, sorry. Mechanics. It's a 2d6 system, which means your average dice roll is on a bell curve instead of a single point. So you get averages not through weight of dice like other certain games, but through the core system itself. And you can spend magic to add dice to your roll, and I just have a weird love of dice pool systems, so that's really cool. If you want to see how this high-level concept pitch plays out, consider checking me out on Tactical Skew, a channel I like to put my edited battle reports on once a quarter. It's not often. But over here on this channel, I'm also going to have a full lore primer and a how to get started and maybe a how to play coming soon. That really depends on motivation levels. Warmachine, however, is a wargame by Privateer Press, originally released in 2003, headed by Matt Wilson, former Magic the Gathering card artist and avid role player, where this all began as a homebrew D&D campaign he made with 2 other friends in a world called the Iron Kingdoms. They took that fanfic and ran with it, creating a game that at one point was the biggest competitor to 40k out there. The Iron Kingdoms began as a steampunk world with all those trappings, a fantasy land that had just ticked over into World War I era technology, plus magic. It had always put a heavy focus on the technology aspect of its world and how difficult life at that technology stage would be. However, in its newest incarnations, Mark IV, etc., it's kind of moving to have more of a focus on the fantastical elements. Signar, the poster boy faction, are a good representation of the world. You have classic, fully plated knights fighting alongside ranks of riflemen with revolving barrel rifles, next to very clearly World War I trench warfare, like with machine guns. And then you get the fusion where the knights upgrade their swords with arcanotech and can fire lightning for their guns, and then... Oh right, okay, warcasters, hold on. Warcasters, what are they? The most popular thing in the game, right? Yeah. They're battle mages. They have guns and spells. They're awesome. They define the battlefield, and narratively, the game ages. So throughout the 20 years of Warmachine, the main guy for Signar was a guy called Coleman Stryker, right? Think of him as Guilliman if you want. He has had 4 models, and then finally he has died. He was the main character practically, and he died. Models still usable in game, of course, but he's gone narratively. He died in the Infernal War that happened at the end of Mark III. Same with a lot of other characters. You'll have them as a fresh young buck, all the way up to a grizzled veteran. I mean, Victoria Haley begins as a little noob, and her final incarnation, she literally died but came back to life even more powerful, or as we call it, she Jesused it. But on the way back to life, she was so powerful, she could see the strands of fate and thought, hey, I'll bring these lovely ladies back with me too. And so she is 3 models on the battlefield, her past, present and future. That's insane. I kind of love it. Minor aside, how aren't there more chrono mages in media, by the way? Such a cool concept. Shenanigans. Yeah, probably the shenanigans. The shenags, if you will. Before we dive into mechanics though, do consider liking and leaving a comment. And if you really like what I'm doing here, check me out on Patreon, where you get access to my Discord and/or digital goodies at certain tiers. For your comment, tell me your favourite Warmachine faction and why, or if you don't know Warmachine at all, which faction just looks the coolest as you look at my green screen behind me. As for the war game and the mechanics, it's a full I go, you go system, and I don't like to make grand sweeping statements, chaps, chapesses and chap-I, but like, I go, you go is always a bad system, because that wouldn't be true if I said that, but to release a new edition of your game in the year of our Lord 2023 and not expect divine retribution is pretty bold. And I will say this has to be my biggest bugbear of the rules, but purely from a philosophical standpoint, because somehow it works, right? But it only works if you accept the Warmachine system for what it is and don't bring in preconceived notions from other systems, aka let me tell you why it works for Warmachine in a way it simply doesn't work for other games you may have heard of, like perhaps Warhammer 40k, aka hear me huffing on copium. Okay, so look, I'm not going to call Warmachine a skirmish game, it obviously isn't. But I really can't call it a mass battle, full-scale war game like 40k or Star Wars Legion either. If you know 40k, it's not that. There's an odd nimbleness to the flow of the game that makes it not just a hybrid in scale, but I feel also a hybrid of war game and board game. Now again, I wouldn't call it a board game in the same way I wouldn't call it a skirmish game, but there's a tactical element and a preciseness to the game that comes from that side of the gaming sphere. But also, it doesn't lean heavily into tokens like Star Wars Legion, so it doesn't feel like a board game. It simply has the clear-cut tactical decisions of a simpler, more refined game like a board game. It is a simile of a board game, if you will. Warmachine plays like a hybrid war game board game. That's it. It is a game that is based around having a strategy and a combo and making it work. It is very legitimate to look at the board like it is a puzzle to be solved and then enact that plan. And it works. You can begin your turn unable to score any points, and by the correct application of activation order in the right way, end up scoring things you couldn't before. Every faction is a toolbox for both attacking and defending. Okay, that isn't explained enough. Just accept that if you view Warmachine like a puzzle to be solved instead of dice to be rolled, you will enjoy it. If I had to boil it down to a single sentence that existing gamers would understand, Warmachine is cool models on a board instead of cool models rolling endless dice. I'm not saying Warmachine is inherently better than any other game out there, but it is different and truly unique enough that it is its own thing. I haven't seen it elsewhere. It excels at strategic thinking in a way 40k simply doesn't. It is I go, you go, but instead of being phased gameplay like 40k, you do everything you can with each unit at a time. So you might move with unit A, then shoot with unit A, and then with unit A done, move and fight with unit B and go through your army in this way. And Warmachine is 100% about the heroes, to the extent that if your hero, the leader of your army, your warcaster or warlock, dies, you lose the game. Doesn't matter what the score is, you done got wrecked. Now this is a fascinating default game mode that defines everything about Warmachine. Everything from the way you play to how it looks on the table. Honestly, Warmachine is a blending of mass battle games with skirmish games, using an action-based system even though it doesn't call it an action-based system, and then the I go, you go to simulate strategic mass battles instead of reactionary battles. With every model getting to activate in unison, you get a bit of that skirmish feel, the flow to it, right? Even when you're playing with the absolute maximum points level, because there's no mass rolling. Once a unit has accomplished what you wanted it to do, you can make the rest of the unit do something else. It's a great system for creating interesting combos, and what are combos but puzzles to solve? Puzzles are good, right? Think about 40k or kill scene for a moment. You're in turn 3 and things haven't gone well for you. You're down so many points that even if you max score, you can't claw it back. The game is done. And I think we've all been there in games of 40k, where you know who's going to win by the end of turn bloody 1, right? But you're locked into the game for a grueling 3 hours until things are confirmed. In Warmachine, you are always one turn away from winning or losing. This is a huge part of making Warmachine a puzzle to solve, because another huge factor of Warmachine is that some abilities can move the enemy models and some abilities give you extra movement after certain actions. Can't possibly outscore the enemy, but the enemy had to overextend to get that score lead? Time to solve a puzzle. Can you position, kill and reposition in such a way as to take advantage of board positioning? We always say it, okay? 40k and Kill Team are games of movement because that's the only thing you have full control over, right? The top players win in the movement phase. Star Wars Shatterpoint is a great game because all of your attacks give you a chance to move you or your enemy's models, and it lends a really dynamic element to the game that's missing from others. Well, Warmachine has that dynamic positioning. And that's where I go, you go makes sense. Because the core game loop is solving the puzzle set before you each turn. Alternating activations are great about can you respond to a changing situation and think on the fly, but mass battle games aren't really supposed to be simulating that. We are the top-down general commanding his army, not the sergeant on the ground telling people to make a mad dash out of cover. It's a system that works for what the game is trying to represent. Minor side note though, I do prefer skirmish games, so Warmachine Skirmish when, am I right? Also in the Iron Kingdoms it's called, in Warmachine, sky ships exist. Warmachine X-Wing when, am I right? And before I forget, there is an app for Android, iPhone and Windows. It's free with a paid option. The paid option gives you access to extended lore with stories that get weekly updates, plus a whole slew of background information. Also, the free version has a limit on the number of lists you can store. I want to say you can store 6 lists for free, but I actually can't remember as I pay for it because I like to read my little stories. But it's there. It works well. No complaints. And it's free. For the rules, yeah. Game sizes. There are official rules for 30, 50, 75, 100 and 100 plus. 30 points is the taster game, if you will. It's a little skirmish game where you can smash it out in an hour and focus on just trying to kill the enemy warcaster. You can expect to have about 10 models on the board-ish. Great for learning the game. Low hobby investment for amount of game played. 50 points is where it starts as a proper game with enough units on the board to play with objectives and starting to see combos in your army. This is a 2-hour game max. If you both know what you're doing, this is really 1.5 hours tops. Okay, this is honestly a totally fine points level to play at forever. If you like a fast game with tactical decisions, honestly 50 points is a valid game size to view as a skirmish game almost, or a mass battle game depending on how you list build. And all of the tournament and narrative missions released work at this size. 75 points is now the game proper. This is where list building opens up but still has limits. Okay, list building is a question of what tools do I need as opposed to 100 points games where list building is a bit more of how many of this gigantic son of a gun hammer can I fit into my toolbox. For me personally, as a relatively new player, I think Mk4 is quite clearly supposed to be a 75 point game. But all the long-term diehards insist 100 is the place to be playing at. But they aren't making this video, so they're wrong, I'm right. 75 point games is clearly the superior format for those who aren't mired in legacy BS. Model counts though, right? We need to know. Because you don't know, so I'm going to tell you. Alright, cool. Warmachine, like many mass battle games, has the potential for wild skews in list building. You can go super heavy into your warjacks and even colossals and end up with under 10 models at 75 points. Okay, well, sorry. Actually, you could end up with 6 models, but that would be a bad list. But 10 models and your list will do something. Something weird, it's a skew, but not nothing. Or you can skew super hard into infantry and end up with a swarm of 78 models. An average Mk4 army at 75 points, you should expect to be at 30 models-ish. And if you want to swap 10 of those for one big robot, that's an easy swap depending on how much you like painting. For an example, here's my House Callus 50 point Dreadguard army. It's 12 models and this is a legitimate list that is built to do a specific thing, aka win if I roll enough tough saves. Alternatively, my Shadowflame Shard, which is literally the starter army box, is 20 models at the 50 point game size. Or at 75 points, we have my Signar rocking 26 models. These are all Mk4 forces and this is around the size you should expect to be facing. Casual versus a competitive. Right, so we've got to discuss, okay? Casual versus competitive. What sort of community are you going to face? Is this a die-hard competitive game? Is it full-blown fluff bunny narrative? So this is actually super interesting, if I'm honest. No, wait, sorry. Okay, let me just answer the question directly, and then I'll ramble about it for a bit, okay? Warmachine has rules that allow you to do both, obviously, but the narrative scenarios are pure theatre of the mind and basically just alternative objectives to complete. But there's no doubt that the mechanics and the community skew competitive, whilst amusingly the company skews narrative. With the core gameplay loop being akin to a puzzle to solve and the potential for a misplaced model to lose you the game, you may struggle to play narratively whilst keeping the format still including caster kill. That's the issue there. Always being one turn away from losing, right? Due to the lethality of the game, casual play is a challenge. In the same way that casual play in Kill Team is really hard due to the game's lethality. It can be done, but it's not encouraged by the core rules due to the natural lethality of the game. And the community tends to be, as many communities are, ex-40k players who decided they didn't like 40k or Games Workshop and wanted a system or company that respected its players. This saw Warmachine boom headshot back around 2015, and they served its players by being an agile company that provided the sort of competitive play that Games Workshop refused to do at the time. Privateer Press leaned into it, the community leaned into it, everyone was happy. Now there's a shift in tone. The company is trying to come back to a slightly more even keel. They're putting out narrative missions that are well received as alternative game modes by the community. Everyone that plays them likes them. Solid work. And if you go to a Privateer Press allied tournament, they are all about the narrative, with in fact their last event having the company 3D print a huge dragon that sat in the centre of game tables that spiraled out from it, and depending on where your table was in relation to the dragon, Blightergast, you would have to deal with a different battlefield condition, right? Pure narrative. So the company is trying, but it does feel like they're fighting a bit against the community and the mechanics. Because on the flip side, the majority of tournaments use the Steamroller packet, Privateer's competitive tournament packet. It's a decent tournament packet that recently had a huge update that has given their official competitive tournaments actually more of a narrative feel to its objective placement, which is kind of cool. Much less static, way more dynamic objectives. No longer are objectives set points, but they can become terrain features. So you're fighting over woods, and they've done some really interesting things there. Very cool. They have attempted campaign play in the past with the Oblivion book. It was widely regarded as bloody brilliant, with mechanics to change your army as you continue the campaign and manage to both reward the winners but also the losers, so that you didn't end up in a landslide territory if one player just keeps on winning. And it was a true branching path campaign, a true campaign, a narrative, not an open-ended random linking of individual games like we're currently seeing as the style at the time from other companies. But ultimately, as with all mass-scale wargames, you don't have much customization over the individual models. So I don't know how into the idea of the models being my guys you can really get. Again, it's more that you're a general commanding the troops, and why would you care if one model has gained the lucky rabbit foot equipment, right? This isn't Necromunda. In my opinion, without an individual model being able to upgrade weapons and full loadout, it's very hard to run truly narrative. Again, Warmachine Skirmish went, right? The Warjacks have built-in magnet holes. Give us magnet holes for an elite squad of dudes so we can customize them for skirmish. Oh wait, don't do that. That sounds horrible. I don't want to paint that much. I take it back. Warmachine Skirmish, yes. Magnets for normal dudes, no. Oh, sorry. So there's one thing about the Steamroller packet I forgot, which I have to bring out, right? If you know me, you know. Death clocks. Hopefully, due to YouTube algorithm considerations, they will change them to being called unalive clocks. A death clock is a chess clock, but when one player hits 0, they just lose. Doesn't matter the score, if you time out, you lose. I like a nice, quick game, or failing that, I like a game that I know won't drag out until the heat death of the universe. And Warmachine provides official timings right there for you. No matter what happens, even the largest size official game is a maximum of 2.5 hours. And the size I prefer is an official 2 hours. And if you know the game, you're going to finish before that. Right. With mechanics, tournament play, narrative all covered, finally I want to talk about the models themselves. As mentioned, I will be discussing this with a large amount of bias. I said that in a weird way, bias. So let's just say that I'm a big fan of the aesthetic of Warmachine. Although everyone refers to Warmachine as being steampunk, it's lacking all of the trappings of traditional steampunk, and they simply mean it's a steam-powered world, except it pretty much isn't that in a traditional sense. Its various factions tend to lean towards diesel punk, or pure fantasy, or even science fantasy. But in reality, if you want to get technical, the aesthetic is much closer to what we might call arcanopunk, or a more popular term these days, magitech. This, for me, basically means I can imagine its tabletop World of Warcraft. Sold. And I grew up on Warcraft, so this just totally hits me in the right spot. Magitech as a style simply isn't seen on the tabletop much. But it is everywhere in computer games, coming very heavily out of the Japanese RPG scene at the moment. Think Final Fantasy. Very common to get flying steamships that need coal to be shoveled to fly, and then mechanical golems, and of course you can't shake a stick without hitting full-plated knights and gun swords in Final Fantasy and Japanese role-playing games for computers. In Warmachine, take that full-plated knight, give him a gas mask, a revolver, a spell, and you've literally just created Warmachine. But look, that's personal, that's subjective. Let's talk the physical, the models themselves. They are 3D printed resin. They are delivered in a single piece. You just have to glue them to the base and they are ready to go. Now I can't lie, okay, Privateer Press clearly began their rollout of this technology before proper testing, and frankly, Wave 1 wasn't fit for consumers. And so their first batch of Signar and Orgoth were, frankly, really bad. I have a first batch of Signar. I don't like using them because they break. On the flip side, I have their latest batch of Shadow Flame Shard, and the resin is much more flexible and stronger and can be cut and drilled and clipped and filed. if you're into that. And of key importance, don't snap the weapons off when I drop them from waist height to the floor. Privateer have since redone their original Signar and Orgoth boxes, so if you're buying them now, you should be all good, of course. As someone that grew up on Warhammer sprues, at first I was conflicted. I legitimately felt like I was missing the assembly of a sprued model. However, as my tastes have evolved, as I have become more cultured, as I have leveled up, ascended, plateaued, one could say even, man, I really like pulling out a model and gluing it to the base, let me tell you that. Done, ready to go. I always thought that I enjoyed assembly. I've never liked painting, just to be clear, but assembly I thought I did. I thought it was my zen. Hashtag, no, not my assembly. That was the real copium there. Now I glue to base and am done. Nothing can make me enjoy painting though, so commission painters, drop me a DM. Alright, okay, war machines. Okay, let's talk about them since we're talking models, okay? They all have magnetized arms and heads. The idea here is that you only need one body to create any combination of their loadout. They are sold with magnets, they are designed to be magnetized. Honestly, don't bother with the heads, they're too small, nobody cares. I do, but that's because I'm weird. And then you can swap the arms easy enough, as all of them have a locator pin, so they also won't swivel. It's a pretty good system, and I imagine a lot of people probably like it. Me personally, I don't like having to paint more things, but it's fine, like whatever, I just don't like painting. Nice to have a full army in a box, and price is comparable to me buying the same amount of 3D printed models off Etsy, so I can't really complain. I mean, cheap is always better, but actually seems aligned with the market, I guess. Mark 3 and Mark 4 transition, let's chat. I mention this now because Mark 4 was a big rules update, but also a total revamp of their physical model range, and Privateer is relaunching their game basically from scratch. A lot of factions have not yet been re-released. If you start doing some research on factions to buy for Warmachine, you might decide you really like the traditional heavily armoured knight look and so want to buy Menoth, Protectorate of Menoth. Well, right now they don't have any models, and in the lore have been wiped out, and there's no mention right now of them coming back. I'm sure they will come back at some point. It's such a great classic aesthetic that would be mad to drop from the game, but right now, not existing. Okay, so Warmachine existed for 20 years or so, and all of the models were primarily metal, sometimes plastic or resin. This means you have 2 decades of old, sometimes very questionable, but sometimes very awesome looking models. With the move to Mark 4, all of these models are no longer produced, and Privateer is revamping their entire product line. So you might still find older models in the wild, but that's just old stock. If you own these old models, they have been given new rules for Mark 4, but this really is for legacy players to be able to continue to play as, you know, the models aren't sold anymore. But they still have the models, they want to play them. All the new Mark 4 models are all 3D printed resin and generally are a bit larger in scale, but more importantly are uniformly scaled across the range now. Privateer used this change in model making technology and rules revamp to redo their product line to make it easier to buy in. As I'm sure we all know, if a product line doesn't have a very clear and obvious beginner's buy-in point, 20 years of stock can become very intimidating, not just to new players, but also to retailers trying to figure out what to stock. A minor note that I mentioned right at the end here because it no longer matters and should be forgotten, but you might hear a lot of older chaps when mentioning the game abbreviating to WMH. This stands for Warmachine Hordes. That's another legacy holdover, as technically this used to be 2 games, one called Warmachine and one called Hordes. They have always been played together as they are fully compatible, with only one difference between the systems, that being the Warcasters in Warmachine versus the Warlocks in Hordes. Warmachine is the steampunk factions, Hordes is the straight fantasy factions. The way the leaders of these factions generate and spread their magic is different, that's all. Warcasters start with their magic filled and spend it throughout the turn. Warlocks start with no magic and build it up throughout their turn, and then have to spend enough of it so they don't lose control of their war beast. It's a thing, don't worry about it. Everything else is the same. Forget that these were ever separate systems. It has always been confusing terminology, and it's good that they finally cleared up the branding. The game is Warmachine. We do, however, need to figure out a new 3-letter abbreviation in the wake of this devastating tragic loss. What would... Oh, it would still just be WM... Wemi? WEM? Alright. Also, there are two versions of list building. There's Prime and there's Unlimited. As all of the rules changed when going from Mark 3 to Mark 4, originally Privateer only gave us rules for the new Mark 4 factions, with a few of the old armies getting ported across. Since then, they've been backfilling practically all of the models in all of the old factions and putting them into the Unlimited format. If you're a new player, you have absolutely nothing to worry about. You'll be playing with Mark 4 armies, and every model is 100% legal in every format. If you're a returning player looking to see if your old models are still valid, check the app. The most likely answer is that yes, your models are available for all standard tournament play as a legacy army. However, it's possible that some are only playable in the Unlimited format. The Unlimited format is totally fine to play in for everything except top tournament play. If you have the option of playing Unlimited or not playing, play Unlimited. It isn't a bad format, there's just more options. It's just a very extended list building format, that's all. I suppose I also need to talk about how to buy into Warmachine, right? Let me prop my leg up here for this one. Okay, so you've got your faction, let's say Signar, okay? Then you've got your army. Army basically means sub-faction. Cool. So, do you want to run the Electric Knights or the Trenches? These two armies can't mix with each other despite being the same overarching faction. I apologise. And then within the faction you have cadres can be used by any army within the faction. This could be the Stormforge. So you can put the storm dudes into either your Electric Knights or your Trenches. Simple. And actual purchasing is super easy here. Pick the army you're interested in based on looks, and they have something called a core army starter. That is a 50-point army in a box, ready to go with a good mix of units. If you're not quite ready for the core starter because, you know, life is a mercurial beast, every faction has a battle box. This is 2 Warjacks and a Warcaster. This will give you enough to play and do some hobby. Privateer has also provided printable cards for the battle boxes so that if you want to use them in a demo game, you don't need to keep the app installed. Then you have more stuff like some of the cadres are also a ready to go beginner force, but not all of them, but that's for another video. Okay, I'll get into that later. So, battle box if you're unsure, or perhaps just want some cool models for the shelf or D&D or whatever. Core starter if you're ready to start like a true capital G gamer. From everything I've heard, the release of consistently stocked battle boxes has been a big success for Privateer and has led to more sales and more new accounts downloading the app. 2 great metrics to show that the game is growing. Is it growing in your local area? Jump on the official Facebook page and ask, or into the official Discord and ask, because they have those. They also even, old school, have like official forums. Who uses forums now? Also, the Tried and True podcast crew have put out a local player finder, where you can either find a local existing group or put yourself up as someone looking for players. So just check out YouTube for Tried and True podcast. And that's that. That's everyone's beginner primer and summary of Warmachine in 2024. My ultimate testament to how much I like this game is the fact that I made this video for it, and to do such I had to paint my models, something that I truly hate doing. I'm also in the process of doing a battle report on my other channel, Tactical Skew, not this one, ignore this, and 1 or 2 other videos like a full buyer's guide and lore video to help get everyone caught up, and the inevitable how to play. I'm doing this because I like the game, and I like the world. It sparks joy. But once again, Warmachine skirmish when? Flying airship battle skirmish game when? Drop a comment, stay hydrated, goodbye.